Take your books and leave before sunset, Uncle Silas ordered. No respectable family has room for a woman clever enough to accuse its men. 2 footmen carried Eleanor Vale's trunk down the front steps, while the rest of the household watched from the windows. No one spoke for her, not even her aunt, who had once promised Eleanor's dying father that Vale House would remain her home until she married. A cold drizzle darkened the gravel beneath Eleanor's shoes. "My father purchased the Eastern farms," she said, keeping her voice steady. "His will placed their income in trust for my dowry. You cannot legally cast me out and keep them." Silas smiled as though she had made a childish mistake. "Your father's will has been examined. The trust never existed. It existed last month, and yet no valid copy can now be found." He held up a folded document bearing the family seal. Eleanor recognized the paper immediately. It was the statement she had been ordered to sign that morning, an admission that grief had confused her memory and led her to make reckless accusations against her uncle. Her signature line remained blank. "You may still save yourself," Silas said. "Sign this, apologize before the family, and I may allow you a modest allowance." Eleanor looked toward the library windows. Her father's account books were still inside, along with his correspondence, his legal notes, and the small oak box in which he had kept every document concerning her future. That box had vanished 3 days earlier. "You are not offering me mercy," she said. "You are asking me to certify your lie." Her youngest cousin flinched behind the glass. Silas did not. He lowered his voice. "You have always mistaken cleverness for power. No, I merely know the difference between a genuine signature and one drawn by a trembling imitator." His smile disappeared. Eleanor looked toward the missing oak box. "You found the transfer I was never meant to see," she said. Silas folded the accusation. "You found nothing. Then why did the document disappear before morning?" He signaled for the footmen to close her trunk. That was answer enough. The stable boy led forward an old carriage. One wheel leaned at an angle, and the driver would not meet Eleanor's eyes. "Where am I being taken?" she asked. "To your former governess in Bath," Silas replied. "My former governess died in January." "Then I suggest you make other arrangements along the road." A murmur passed through the servants. Eleanor's composure nearly broke, but she refused to give her uncle the satisfaction of seeing it. She reached for the banishment statement in his hand. Silas pulled it away. "Changed your mind? I want to examine the seal." His fingers tightened around the paper. Before he could answer, hoofbeats sounded beyond the gates. 4 black horses swept into the courtyard, drawing a carriage marked with the silver hawk of Ashcombe. The servants straightened at once. Silas went pale enough for Eleanor to notice, though his welcoming smile appeared before the carriage stopped. Adrian Blackwood, Duke of Ashcombe, stepped onto the wet gravel. He wore no hat despite the rain. His dark coat was cut with severe elegance, and his expression carried the calm assurance of a man accustomed to entering any house as its most powerful occupant. Eleanor had once admired that assurance. Then he had used it to humiliate her. 3 months earlier, she had written to warn him that several deeds connected to his northern villages contained impossible witness dates. Adrian had invited her to explain herself at a dinner attended by half the county. When she produced her evidence, he had glanced at one page before declaring that Miss Vale's imagination exceeded both her judgment and her station. The laughter around that table still returned to her at night. Now the same man walked directly toward her. "Your Grace." Silas bowed deeply. "Had we known you intended to honor us, I did not come to honor you." Adrian's gaze moved from Eleanor's trunk to the waiting carriage, and finally to the statement in Silas's hand. "Miss Vale is leaving," Silas explained. "A private family matter. No longer." The Duke removed a document from inside his coat. Eleanor did not take it. "What is that?" "A marriage proposal." For the first time that day, the courtyard became completely silent. Silas stared at the Duke. "You cannot be serious." Adrian ignored him. "The terms provide you with an independent allowance, rooms of your choosing at Ashcombe, and authority to examine every estate account under my seal." Eleanor almost laughed. "You publicly called me a liar. I remember. You told the county magistrates that my conclusions were absurd. I remember that as well. And now you wish to marry me? I require a duchess with your particular intelligence." The answer struck harder than an insult. He had not come because he trusted her. He had come because the danger she had warned him about had finally reached his door. Eleanor looked into his controlled grey eyes. And your apology? There will be no apology. Rain gathered on the Duke's shoulders. He extended the proposal as though the title attached to his name should outweigh every wound his pride had caused. Eleanor finally accepted the document, intending only to tear it in half. Then she saw the wax. A silver hawk had been pressed into deep red, but beneath its left wing ran a tiny crescent-shaped fracture. It was not damage caused during the journey. The broken curve had been made by a flaw in the ceiling matrix itself. Eleanor had seen that exact fracture that morning. It appeared on the document supposedly proving that her father's trust had never existed. Her gaze shifted to the paper in Silas's hand. The same red wax. The same broken crescent. The family seal stamped over it was merely a second impression, applied to conceal what lay beneath. Silas noticed where she was looking and quickly folded the statement. Adrian followed her gaze. What is it? Eleanor did not answer. Her mind moved through every vanished account, every altered deed, and every witness who had suddenly withdrawn after the Duke dismissed her publicly. Silas had not merely taken advantage of her disgrace. He had been prepared for it. Someone with access to the Duke of Ashcombe's private seal had manufactured the evidence used to steal Eleanor's inheritance, and her uncle's fear at the Duke's arrival was not the fear of losing control over an unwanted niece. It was the fear that marriage would place Eleanor inside Ashcombe House. With access to the records, he had killed her reputation to keep her from examining. Her banishment had never been only about silencing a clever woman. It had been designed to keep her away from the one estate where she could prove everything. Eleanor folded the proposal without breaking its seal. I will not marry you today. Adrian's expression did not change, but something sharpened behind his eyes. I did not travel through the night to conduct a courtship on your uncle's steps. Then you have wasted a journey. Silas gave a strained laugh. Your Grace, Eleanor has always possessed an unfortunate temper. Allow me to speak with her privately. He reached for her arm. Eleanor stepped beyond his grasp. Touch me, and I shall ask the Duke to summon a magistrate before you have time to burn another document. The watching servants lowered their eyes. Silas's face reddened. Adrian glanced at the folded statement in his hand. What document would he burn? The one bearing an impression made by your private seal. That is impossible. So was the theft of 3 northern villages, according to you. The words landed cleanly between them. 3 months earlier, he would have answered with contempt. Now his jaw tightened, but he did not dismiss her. It was not an apology. It was merely the first sign that fear had made him capable of listening. Eleanor turned the marriage proposal over. You said I would have authority to examine every account at Ashcombe. As my wife, I will examine them before becoming your wife. No outsider is permitted unrestricted access to ducal records. Then find a more obedient bride. She held the proposal out to him. Adrian did not take it. Silas moved closer. Eleanor, consider what you are refusing. Without this marriage, you have nowhere to go. The cruelty of that truth pressed against her ribs. Her purse contained less than £4. Her name had been poisoned throughout the county, and a woman travelling alone could be denied lodging merely on the strength of a gentleman's warning. But desperation did not require surrender. Eleanor looked at the Duke. 3 days at Ashcombe House. I will be received as a contracted examiner, not your betrothed. I will have separate rooms, a female attendant, and written authority to inspect whatever bears the ducal seal. You intend to negotiate my proposal in the rain. I intend to discover whether marrying you would save me from one thief, only to place me under the power of another. A footman coughed to hide his reaction. Adrian studied her for a long moment. He was not accustomed to conditions, especially from a woman standing beside a broken carriage with nowhere safe to sleep. At last, he removed a small notebook from his coat and wrote several lines. He signed the page, then pressed his signet ring into a drop of wax supplied by his secretary. Eleanor examined the result. The silver hawk appeared perfectly beneath the rain, every feather distinct, every edge unbroken. There was no crescent-shaped fracture. She looked again at the seal on his proposal. This was not made with the ring you are wearing. No. Formal agreements are sealed in my estate office. Who has access to that matrix? My steward, my solicitor, and myself. And during the past year, the same 3. Silas turned toward the house. This has become absurd. Eleanor's carriage is waiting. The front door opened before he reached it. Mrs. Wren, the aging housekeeper, came down the steps, carrying a leather portfolio beneath her apron. She had served Eleanor's father for 22 years and had taught Eleanor how to manage a household long before anyone imagined that knowledge might become dangerous. Silas stopped. "Go inside." Mrs. Wren continued walking. "You told me to pack Miss Vale's belongings," she said. "These belong to her." She placed the portfolio in Eleanor's hands. The leather was scratched and empty except for 3 sheets sewn into the lining. Eleanor recognized her father's narrow handwriting at once. Silas lunged forward. Adrian stepped between them. The movement was quiet, but it changed the entire courtyard. "You will remain where you are," the Duke said. Silas froze her. Eleanor opened the portfolio carefully. The rescued pages contained columns of tenant rents, boundary measurements, and dates. Her father had taught her to read such records when she was 12. As a solicitor's daughter, she had spent years copying leases and comparing signatures, while other girls practiced decorative stitching. He had never treated her mind as an embarrassment. At 17, Eleanor had discovered that a land agent was charging 5 tenant families twice for the same acreage. Her calculations returned nearly £200 to people who would otherwise have lost their homes. Silas had accepted the praise for correcting the error. Her father had quietly given Eleanor the agent's brass ruler and told her, "Truth does not become smaller because another person takes credit for finding it." She still carried that ruler in her trunk. Eleanor scanned the rescued pages. One line had been underlined twice. "Ashcombe, Northern rents received in trust for E. Vale." Beneath it appeared a yearly sum large enough to fund her dowry. The payments had continued for 6 years. Then, 9 months earlier, they had been redirected to Vale House under Silas's authority. Eleanor looked up. "My father's trust was partly funded by rents from your estate." Adrian took the page. "Why would Ashcombe rents belong to you? They did not belong to me. Your father used my father as a trustee for 3 farms while a boundary dispute was resolved. My dowry was secured against the trustee's fee." Silas's voice became brittle. "Old arrangements of no present importance." Eleanor traced the final entry. The handwriting changed halfway through the line. The first amount had been written by her father. The instruction redirecting it had been added later in darker ink. Beside it stood the date of his authorization. Her fingers went still. "What have you found?" Adrian asked. "This order transferred the trust income to my uncle." "That is perfectly lawful," Silas said quickly. "Your father signed it." Eleanor raised her eyes. "My father was buried on the 12th of March. She turned the page so the Duke could read it. "This authorization was signed on the 19th, 7 days after his funeral." Mrs. Wren crossed herself. Adrian's control finally cracked. He looked from the impossible signature to the man standing on the steps. Silas did not appear surprised at the date. He appeared surprised that the page had survived. Silas snatched for the page. Adrian caught his wrist before his fingers reached it. "You were warned not to move." For one dangerous instant, neither man yielded. Silas was older and broader, but the Duke's grip forced his hand slowly away from Eleanor's portfolio. "This proves nothing," Silas said. "A copying error. An incorrect date." "My father's death was not a copying error," Eleanor replied. Adrian released him with visible disgust. "The original records will be examined. You have no authority to take Vale family papers." "No," the Duke said. "But Miss Vale does." Eleanor closed the portfolio and handed it to Mrs. Wren. "She does not leave my sight," Eleanor said. "Neither do these pages." Mrs. Wren lifted her chin. "I have already packed my clothes." Silas's disbelief almost pleased Eleanor. He had expected every servant to fear unemployment more than dishonor. "You will never work in this county again," he told the housekeeper. "Then I shall enjoy my first holiday in 22 years. Eleanor helped her into the Ashcombe carriage. Before following, she faced her uncle one final time. "My father's books, my personal correspondence, and the oak document box will be delivered to Ashcombe House before noon tomorrow. You are in no position to issue commands." "No," Eleanor said, "but the man standing beside me owns nearly every road your tenants use to reach market." Adrian glanced at her. It was the smallest victory imaginable, yet it shifted something inside her. Silas had cast her out, believing she would be defenseless. Less than an hour later, he was being given a deadline. Adrian opened the carriage door. "This does not mean I have accepted your proposal," Eleanor reminded him. "I am becoming painfully aware of that." Ashcombe House appeared beyond the hills shortly before dusk, its long stone front overlooking fields soaked by recent rain. Eleanor had seen the estate only once before, during the dinner at which Adrian destroyed her credibility. She remembered the glittering table, the laughter, and the way he had leaned back while she stood alone, holding proof no one wished to examine. This time, she entered through the main doors with her father's papers beneath her arm. A tall gentleman waited in the entrance hall. Lord Julian Cresswell was Adrian's cousin and the nearest male relative likely to inherit the title if the Duke died without a son. His courteous smile looked entirely appropriate, but Eleanor remembered him laughing louder than anyone when Adrian called her a schemer. "Miss Vale," Julian said. "What an unexpected return." "Not entirely unexpected," she answered. "Someone removed 3 account volumes from the estate library an hour after my first visit." His smile remained steady. "Did they?" Adrian removed his gloves. "Eleanor will examine all records concerning the northern villages." Julian's gaze flickered at the use of her Christian name. "Those accounts are under my supervision, not for the next 3 days." Only then did Eleanor understand how much authority Adrian had given his cousin. After rejecting her warning, he had placed Julian in charge of reorganizing the disputed properties, the very records Eleanor believed had been altered. Adrian had not merely refused to investigate. He had rewarded the man who encouraged his refusal. Julian turned his charm toward the Duke. "The sale contracts must be signed tomorrow. If we delay again, the creditors may petition for seizure." "What sale contracts?" Eleanor asked. "Several unproductive woodland parcels. The northern villages are not woodland. The timber surrounding them is included as security. Then the families living there are being used as security as well." Julian's expression cooled. "Estate finance is more complicated than copying documents in a solicitor's office." Eleanor smiled faintly. "Then explaining it should present no difficulty." Adrian looked between them. "Show her the contracts." Julian hesitated for half a breath before leading them into the estate office. Ledgers covered the central table. Maps had been rolled into baskets, and correspondence lay in ordered stacks. Everything appeared carefully managed. Too carefully. A clerk placed the proposed sale before Eleanor. The agreement claimed that Ashcombe had failed to repay a private loan secured against the northern farms. Unless Adrian surrendered the timber rights by noon the following day, the creditor could claim the entire district. Eleanor examined the figures. "The interest has been calculated twice." Julian leaned over her shoulder. "It has not." She used her father's brass ruler to follow the columns. "This amount already includes the quarterly interest. The next line adds it again as a separate charge." The clerk's face changed. Eleanor continued. "And this payment from February was credited to a different account, although the receipt number belongs to the northern estate." Adrian took the ledger. Julian gave a dismissive shrug. "A clerk's carelessness. Osterfall. A clerk's carelessness that makes your debt appear £8,000 larger," Eleanor said. Adrian looked at his cousin. "Suspend tomorrow's signing. We will lose the creditor's patience. Then he may practice the virtue." Julian's jaw tightened. A knock sounded at the office door. A frightened woman in a tenant's cloak stood outside with a young boy clutching her skirt. An estate officer tried to pull her back. "Forgive me, Your Grace," she pleaded. "They say we must leave our cottage tonight because my husband's rent was never paid." Julian closed the ledger. "This is not the proper time." Eleanor noticed a crumpled receipt in the woman's hand. "Let me see it." The receipt carried an Ashcombe number, matching an entry Eleanor had just examined. She checked the ledger and found the same payment listed under a vacant property 2 miles away. "Her rent was paid," Eleanor said. "Someone transferred it to another holding." Julian's patience broke. "You cannot overturn estate decisions after reading one receipt." "No, but the Duke can postpone an eviction based on a falsified account." Adrian ordered the officer to return the woman's keys and restore her name to the tenant roll. The boy began to cry with relief. As his mother thanked Eleanor, a grain of pale blue sand fell from the folded receipt onto the table. Eleanor touched it with one fingertip. Blotting sand was commonly brown or white. Her father had used blue only for confidential amendments because its color made later additions easier to identify. She looked toward a silver shaker beside Julian's writing desk. The same blue grains surrounded its base. Adrian noticed her attention. "Is something wrong? Where are rent receipts prepared?" In the outer office, Julian answered quickly. A dozen clerks have access to that sand. Adrian appeared, satisfied by the explanation. Eleanor was not. The widow's receipt had been altered after payment, blotted with sand taken from the desk of the man controlling the northern accounts. Yet Julian had spoken as though the colour meant nothing before Eleanor explained its significance. He knew precisely what she had recognized. Julian walked past her to collect the suspended contracts. His pleasant expression had returned, but he placed one protective hand over the silver sand shaker. At the doorway, he paused. For the first time, he did not look at Eleanor as an amusing woman who believed herself clever. He looked at her as the only person standing between him and something worth destroying an entire family to obtain. Julian removed the silver sand shaker from the desk. I shall have the office reorganized, he said. Miss Vale appears easily distracted by ordinary stationery. Eleanor blocked the doorway. Leave it where it was. You have no authority over my possessions. If it is your personal property, why did you claim a dozen clerks used it? His fingers tightened around the silver handle. Adrian watched them both. Put it down, Julian. With a short laugh, Julian returned the shaker to the desk. Eleanor wrapped it in a clean sheet of paper without touching its sides. She folded the corners inward and asked Mrs. Wren to seal the parcel with an impression from the housekeeper's ring. Julian's smile faded. You are treating my office like the scene of a murder. No, Eleanor said. At the moment, I am treating it like the scene of theft. She turned back to the ledgers. Eleanor opened the rent ledger beside the mill invoice. 11 families are marked delinquent, she said. Yet every missing payment reappears in this account as interest on the northern loan. Julian glanced at the columns. A clerk posted them incorrectly, 11 times. She placed the widow's receipt beneath the lamp. Its number matched a payment assigned to an empty cottage. The same number appeared again beside the unpaid grain shipment. Mr. Finch rose from his desk. I entered that receipt under her cottage, he said. Someone moved it after the books were closed. Julian's expression hardened. Sit down. Instead, the clerk unlocked the cabinet beside his desk. Inside were new leases, transferring the supposedly delinquent cottages to the North Vale Improvement Company. Each bundle was tied with green silk, and pale blue blotting sand clung to the altered dates. Eleanor touched the silver shaker on Julian's desk. The rent, the false interest, and the missing grain payment were not separate mistakes. Someone moved the same money through 3 accounts to manufacture a debt. A messenger burst into the office. The Hatherden mill has stopped. The merchant will not release the grain without payment. How long before the village runs out of flour? Eleanor asked. By tomorrow morning. Julian closed the cabinet. I will address it after the estate review. Children cannot eat an estate review. Eleanor wrote a 7-day guarantee against the examination fee promised by Adrian. Julian stared at the amount. You are risking everything you possess over an accounting theory. No, I am risking it on 11 paid receipts and a mill invoice you hoped no one would place beside them. She gave the guarantee to the messenger. Before nightfall, the mill turned again. Julian later announced that his own internal review had corrected a minor clerical problem. Eleanor let him finish before placing the widow's receipt, the false debt entry, and the grain invoice in front of Adrian. One payment travelled through all 3 records, she said. Ask Mr. Finch who moved it. At dinner, Julian announced that his internal review had discovered a temporary confusion in the grain accounts. The shipment has been released, he told Adrian. There was never any danger. Eleanor placed her spoon down. Your internal review did not find it. Julian looked wounded. Must every correction become a public performance? You were willing to let 60 families go without flour until tomorrow, and Miss Vale recklessly guaranteed estate debt using funds she does not yet possess, he replied. An act of emotion, not expertise. Adrian turned to her. Is that true? The guarantee is real. The recklessness is not. Julian produced a letter and laid it beside Adrian's plate. This arrived from the county magistrate. Miss Vale's uncle reports that she stole private documents, threatened servants, and has developed an obsession with imagined forgeries. Adrian read it in silence. Eleanor felt the room closing around her again. Silas was repeating the method that had already succeeded. Attack her sanity before she could present her evidence. The northern sale cannot be postponed indefinitely, Julian continued. If you place the estate records under the control of a woman accused of instability, the royal inquiry will assume Ashcombe is concealing fraud. Fraud is precisely what Ashcombe is concealing, Eleanor said. Adrian's gaze hardened. Choose your next words carefully. I have chosen every word carefully. That is why your cousin fears them. Julian rose. I will not remain here to be insulted. You will remain long enough for Mr. Finch to answer one question. The young clerk stood outside the dining room with the original payment ledger in his arms. Mrs. Wren waited beside him, holding the sealed parcel containing the blue sand shaker. Eleanor looked directly at Adrian. You dismissed my evidence once, without questioning the man who handled your records. Tonight, you have another choice. She opened the door wider. Ask Mr. Finch, who altered those accounts after he closed them. Adrian did not invite Mr. Finch into the dining room. He remained seated with Silas's letter open beside his plate. Did you arrange for this clerk to appear? He asked Eleanor. I asked him to tell you what he witnessed. That was not my question. Julian slowly resumed his chair. The satisfaction in his eyes was almost invisible. Eleanor understood the trap. If she said yes, Julian would claim she had coached the clerk. If she said no, Mr. Finch's arrival would appear secretly arranged. I gave him no instructions concerning his answer, she said. Adrian looked toward the doorway. Come in, Mr. Finch. The clerk entered, with the ledger pressed against his chest. You told Miss Vale that Lord Cresswell altered these accounts, Adrian said. Mr. Finch glanced at Julian. Answer his grace, Eleanor urged. The young man's lips parted, but no sound emerged. Julian poured himself more wine. Perhaps he would speak more freely if Miss Vale were not watching him. I am the person he approached. You are also the person who promised money to save Hatherden's mill. A clerk supporting an impoverished mother might easily mistake generosity for an invitation to please his benefactor. Mr. Finch went rigid. Eleanor turned to him. Your mother lives at Hatherden. He lowered his eyes. Julian had not threatened the clerk's employment alone. He had threatened his mother's home, her food, and perhaps her safety. Adrian repeated the question. Did Lord Cresswell alter my accounts? Mr. Finch's fingers shook against the leather cover. No, Your Grace. Eleanor felt the answer like a door closing. Did you see him bring the new leases into the office? No. You told me. I was confused, miss. Julian leaned back, allowing silence to finish the accusation for him. Mrs. Wren stepped forward. That boy was not confused an hour ago. Adrian rubbed one hand across his brow. Enough. No, Eleanor said. Not until you ask why his answer changed. I cannot conduct an inquiry by forcing frightened servants to repeat whatever confirms your suspicions. Then conduct it by examining the dates, the transferred rents, and the impossible signature. I have examined what you brought me. You glanced at it during dinner. His eyes flashed. Do not speak to me as though I were one of your pupils, and do not behave as though your pride deserves greater protection than 60 families. Adrian stood. The room seemed to shrink around his anger. Months earlier, Eleanor had mistaken that anger for strength. Now she saw what it truly was, the weapon of a man who could command almost anything except his own discomfort. A servant entered carrying a silver tray. The Royal Commissioner's secretary has arrived, Your Grace. He requests an immediate answer regarding tomorrow's review. Adrian broke the seal on the message. Julian watched him read. What does it say? Eleanor asked. The Crown has received evidence that Ashcombe debts were concealed. Unless I demonstrate stable administration before noon, the Commissioner may suspend my authority over the disputed lands. Who sent the evidence? The creditor, or the person pretending to act for him? Julian reached into his coat. There is one way to prevent the suspension. He placed a prepared document on the table. Eleanor's stomach tightened. How long have you been carrying that? It was drafted after the first notice arrived. The agreement appointed Julian sole administrator of the Northern Estates for 30 days. It authorized him to negotiate with creditors, remove employees, settle disputed leases, and take custody of every seal and record connected to the properties. It gave him precisely the control he needed to make the false debts real. Eleanor read the final page. If you sign this, he can surrender the villages without consulting you. He can prevent the Crown from assuming control, Adrian replied. He can also destroy the evidence before the Commissioner sees it. Julian gave a weary sigh. Every delay increases the debt. The debt has been inflated. According to a woman who arrived this afternoon carrying stolen papers. Adrian looked again at Silas's letter. Eleanor stepped closer to him. You asked me to come because you knew I had been right about something. I asked you to examine the accounts, not accuse my family without proof. The proof is in front of you. A frightened clerk has denied your claim. Because Julian controls whether his mother keeps her home. Another conclusion you cannot establish. Mrs. Wren held out the sealed parcel. The sand on the altered receipt came from Lord Cresswell's desk. A dozen clerks use it, Adrian said. Eleanor stared at him. He had repeated Julian's explanation word for word. You have not questioned a single one of those clerks. I do not have time. That is what they are depending upon. The clock on the mantel struck 9. Adrian took up a pen. Eleanor put her hand over the signature line. Once you give him this authority, anything done under your seal will become your responsibility. And if I refuse, the Crown may take the estate from me tomorrow. Then let the Commissioner examine it. And expose generations of Ashcombe business to a stranger. You would rather expose thousands of tenants to the man whose accounts created the crisis. Adrian's voice dropped. Remove your hand. Ask for one night. No. Question the outer office clerks. There is no time. Open the cabinet and compare those leases with the original tenant rolls. His restraint snapped. You have been inside my house for less than a day, yet you speak as if everything within it belongs under your judgment. Your uncle was right about one thing. You have no understanding of where your authority ends. Even Julian fell silent. Eleanor removed her hand from the document. This is the final moment in which you can claim you did not know. Adrian looked at the flawed seal, then at the royal message beside it. He picked up the pen. Do not ask me to protect this estate with nothing but your suspicions. I am asking you to protect it from your pride. His pen touched the paper. He signed. Julian pressed the flawed estate seal into red wax beneath the Duke's name. The broken crescent appeared under the hawk's left wing. Eleanor watched Adrian see it. For one heartbeat, doubt crossed his face. Then he handed the document to his cousin. There, the estate remains under Ashcombe control. No, Eleanor said quietly. It remains under the control of whoever has been using that seal. Julian folded the agreement and summoned 2 estate officers. Under the authority granted to me, the office will be closed. All records connected to the northern lands will be moved to secure storage. Mr. Finch is dismissed, and Miss Vale's examination is concluded. Adrian looked startled. I authorized administration, not interference with my instructions. The Commissioner demanded stability. Allowing an accused thief to search confidential papers is hardly stable. Eleanor waited for Adrian to overrule him. He did not. Perhaps he feared appearing uncertain before the servants. Perhaps reversing an order moments after signing it felt too much like admitting she had been right. Whatever the reason, his silence completed the betrayal. Eleanor turned to Mrs. Wren. Collect our things. Adrian stepped toward her. Where will you go? To Hatherden. You cannot stay in a tenant village. I can stay wherever someone opens a door. And the proposal? She removed it from her pocket and placed it beside his untouched wine. You wanted my intelligence without accepting my judgment. You may now enjoy your cousin's advice without interruption. The rain had stopped by the time Eleanor's carriage reached the lower gates. Ahead, 3 covered wagons rolled out from the estate's service road. Each carried wooden record chests marked with the Ashcombe hawk. Julian had begun removing the evidence less than 20 minutes after gaining authority. One wagon struck a rut. Its rear covering lifted, revealing bundles of new leases tied with green silk. Eleanor recognized the driver. He was not an Ashcombe servant. He worked for Uncle Silas at Vale House. The records were not being taken to secure storage. They were being delivered to the other man, who needed them destroyed before the Royal Commissioner arrived. Turn the carriage around, Eleanor ordered. Mrs. Wren caught her sleeve. If we follow those wagons, Silas will know you saw them. He already knows. And Lord Cresswell has estate officers under his command. Eleanor watched the final wagon disappear into the darkness. The records inside might prove every alteration, but chasing armed men along an unlit road would not save them. Continue to Hatherden, she told the driver. We need witnesses more than we need another stolen book. They reached the village shortly before midnight. No lamps burned in the cottages. Nearly every family had gathered outside the mill, where 2 estate officers were fastening a chain across the doors. The widow Eleanor had helped earlier stood at the front of the crowd with her son beside her. She still held the key Adrian had ordered returned. "What has happened?" Eleanor asked. The widow pushed an eviction notice into her hands. They came after dark. Every family accused of unpaid rent must leave by sunrise. There were 23 names on the list. All belonged to properties whose payments had been moved to vacant cottages. The officers wore Ashcombe colours, but the document authorising them bore Julian's signature beneath the Duke's newly granted authority. Eleanor examined the wax. The broken crescent appeared again. One officer pulled the notice from her. "The northern estate is under new administration. You have no standing here. These tenants have receipts. The estate books show arrears. The books were altered. That is a matter for His Grace." Mrs. Wren gave a bitter laugh. His Grace had the matter placed in the hands of the man who altered them. Angry voices rose through the crowd. Several men moved toward the officers. One carried a splitting axe. Another picked up a stone. Eleanor climbed onto the mill steps. "Put those down." No one listened at first. "If you strike an estate officer, they will call this a riot," she shouted. "Then soldiers will come, and every genuine receipt you possess will be treated as an excuse invented after violence." The man with the axe stared at her. "They are taking our homes. I know. Give me 1 hour before you give them the reason they need, to take your freedom as well." The widow stepped beside Eleanor. "She found my rent." That small declaration changed the crowd more effectively than any title could have done. One by one, the villagers lowered their weapons. Eleanor asked every family to bring its rent receipts to the schoolhouse. Mrs. Wren organized them by property, while Eleanor copied the numbers into columns. Some receipts were stained with grease or folded into family Bibles. One had been preserved beneath the lining of a baby's cradle. Nearly all bore traces of blue blotting sand. By 2 in the morning, Eleanor had established that the alleged arrears were fabricated, yet the pattern extended beyond rent. Each property named for seizure stood along the same narrow path beside the River Hather. The farms did not share crops, tenants, or equal value. There was no ordinary financial reason to group them. Eleanor opened the pages rescued from her father's portfolio. His boundary measurements formed the same line. "Bring me a map," she said. The schoolmaster unrolled an old county survey across a desk. Eleanor marked every threatened cottage, farm, and woodland parcel. Together, they created an uninterrupted strip from the western quarry to the river junction below Ashcombe. Mrs. Wren leaned over the map. Why would anyone want land in such a peculiar shape? Not for what is on it. Eleanor traced the river's course with her father's brass ruler. For what can be built through it? She remembered conversations overheard in her father's office during the final year of his life. A Crown engineer had visited twice to discuss a commercial canal connecting the inland foundries to the eastern river ports. The proposed route had never been announced because the surrounding ownership was too divided. If one company secretly acquired the entire strip before Parliament approved the project, its investors could demand an enormous price for passage or control the canal themselves. The northern debt was not intended to recover money. It was intended to assemble land. Silas had taken Eleanor's 3 farms because they completed the final section of the route. Julian had falsified Ashcombe's accounts to force the remaining villages into the same company, and Adrian's signature had given him the authority to finish the seizure. Hoofbeats sounded outside. The Duke entered the schoolhouse with rain on his boots and fury in his face. "Why were these notices issued?" he demanded. The estate officers followed him inside. Behind them came the Royal Commissioner's secretary and a solicitor Eleanor did not recognize. Julian was absent. Eleanor handed Adrian the eviction list. "Your administrator ordered them. I did not authorize mass removals. You authorized him to settle disputed leases. I am revoking that authority now." The unfamiliar solicitor opened a leather case. "I fear revocation will not affect agreements already executed, Your Grace." Lord Cresswell transferred the delinquent properties to the North Vale Improvement Company shortly before midnight. Adrian went still. "On whose authority?" The solicitor looked at the signature. "Yours." A murmur moved through the villagers. Adrian faced the estate officers. "Return every key and remove the chains." Neither man obeyed. "They are no longer your officers," Eleanor said. The solicitor confirmed it with an uncomfortable nod. Their contracts passed with the administration of the properties. "Return every key," Adrian ordered. The officers remained still. Julian's solicitor unfolded the signed delegation. "They no longer answer to you. Your Grace. Adrian reached for the document. Eleanor stopped him. Your command cannot undo your signature. A woman removed the Ashcombe badge from her husband's coat and dropped it at Adrian's feet. No one bowed when he passed. Eleanor saw recognition enter his face, not full remorse, but the beginning of an understanding that his signature had harmed people who had trusted him. The mill bell rang outside. Once, twice, then smoke rose from the storehouse roof. Eleanor ran toward the door. The grain delivered under her guarantee had been set alight. Flames climbed the wooden wall while villagers rushed for buckets. Across the road, a mounted messenger nailed a broadside to the inn. The North Vale Improvement Company announced a public auction of every seized property at noon the following day. Once purchased by separate buyers, the land would be nearly impossible to recover through a single claim. Julian and Silas were not merely destroying records. They were scattering ownership before the Royal Commissioner could reconstruct the fraud. Adrian reached for the auction notice. Eleanor took it first. You cannot command this away, she said. His voice was low. Then help me stop it. I will stop it for the families whose homes you placed in his hands. She met his eyes. What happens to your estate will depend on whether you finally tell the truth about what you signed. Behind them, the mill storehouse collapsed in a shower of sparks. They had less than 10 hours before the auction began. Eleanor formed 2 bucket lines before the Duke's officers understood where to stand. Protect the mill first, she ordered. The storehouse is already lost. Adrian seized a bucket and joined the line without removing his coat. No one thanked him. The villagers passed water through his hands as they would through those of any other able-bodied man. By dawn, the mill remained standing, but most of the grain had burned. Eleanor returned to the schoolhouse with soot on her face and a blister across one palm. Mrs. Wren wrapped the injury, while the schoolmaster moved the rent receipts away from the wet windows. We cannot challenge every false debt before noon, Adrian said. No. We only need to prove that the auctioneer knows the title is disputed. The company will deny it. Then we must place evidence in his hands before the first lot is sold. If he proceeds after receiving credible notice of fraud, every buyer risks losing the property later. Adrian looked at the rows of receipts. Will these be enough? They prove the tenants paid. They do not prove who altered the accounts or why. A knock sounded at the back door. Mr. Finch entered, carrying a flour sack. His lip was split, and one sleeve had been torn from his coat. The widow bolted the door behind him. Lord Cresswell's men searched my room, he said. They took every paper I owned. Eleanor rose. Your mother, safe with my sister. Adrian's face hardened. Why did you lie to me? Mr. Finch looked at the floor. Lord Cresswell said my mother's cottage would be seized before morning. I believed him. It was seized anyway, Eleanor said gently. The clerk nodded, shame filling his eyes. That is why I brought this. He opened the flour sack and removed a narrow ledger wrapped in oilcloth. I kept the duplicate register for the estate seal. Every formal impression is supposed to be recorded by date, document, and recipient. Lord Cresswell ordered me to destroy it after Miss Vale's first warning. Why did you not? Adrian asked. Because my father taught me that a clerk who destroys one true account will spend the rest of his life writing lies. He had hidden the register beneath the loose boards of the office coal cupboard. When Julian ordered the records removed, Mr. Finch retrieved it through an outside delivery hatch. The baker who helped him open the hatch had watched the ledger come from its hiding place. The widow had witnessed Mr. Finch carry the sealed bundle directly from the estate to the schoolhouse. Eleanor wrote down each transfer and asked both witnesses to sign. Adrian watched her. You are recording custody. You are. If this reaches the commissioner, Julian will claim Mr. Finch created it last night. We must be able to show where it was kept and who handled it. She opened the register. The final legitimate entry, involving the Northern estate, was dated 9 months earlier. It recorded a routine lease renewal. Below it, 3 pages had been cut out. Eleanor held the book toward the window. Short fibers remained along the binding. Several were green. Mrs. Wren examined them. The same silk used around the leases in the locked cabinet. Mr. Finch nodded. Lord Cresswell bound the removed pages into those bundles. He said, old paper made the company leases appear established. The forgeries were not merely copied onto similar paper. They had been created using pages stolen from the Duke's own seal register. giving them the correct age, watermark, and binding marks. Eleanor placed her father's rescued accounts beside the damaged ledger. The dates aligned. Each time Ashcombe rent money was redirected to Silas, a page disappeared from the seal register within 48 hours. Shortly afterward, one of Eleanor's farms or an Ashcombe tenant property appeared under the company's control. Then she opened the grain counterfoil book. The torn payment stub ended in an elaborate V. Under magnification, from the schoolmaster's reading glass, a second mark appeared beside it, the beginning of an S. S. Vale. Silas Vale had received the money intended for Hatherden's grain. Blue sand clung to the paper's cut edge. Eleanor unwrapped Julian's silver shaker. The grains inside matched in colour and texture. The blue sand identifies where the payment was altered, Adrian said. It supports the link, Eleanor corrected. It does not prove it alone. Mr. Finch turned to an earlier page in the register. This May. The silver shaker had been purchased through the estate office. Julian had charged it to Ashcombe as equipment for confidential company amendments 2 weeks before the first tenant payment disappeared. The company's name was written plainly in the expense entry. North Vale Improvement Company. Adrian sat down heavily. He no longer looked like a duke confronting an administrative problem. He looked like a man seeing the architecture of his own failure. Your first letter named the company, he said to Eleanor. Yes. I was told. You had guessed the name from county gossip. My letter included copies of 2 leases. I never saw them. Mr. Finch opened the correspondence register. Lord Cresswell removed the attachments before placing the letter on your desk. Adrian closed his eyes. Eleanor knew what he wanted that fact to mean, that he had been manipulated, that the most decisive proof had been hidden, that his cruelty had grown from incomplete information, but he had still possessed her written warning. He had still invited her to dinner, glanced at one page, and mocked her before men whose approval mattered more to him than truth. Julian had prepared the lie. Adrian had chosen to perform it. I should have listened, he said. Yes, I was wrong about you. Yes. His gaze met hers. What else would you have me say? The truth, publicly, where your false accusation was heard. A trace of pain crossed his face. You would have me disgrace my own judgment before the commissioner. Your judgment has already disgraced itself. The question is whether you will continue asking other people to bear the cost. Silence settled over the room. At last Adrian stood. Tell me what you require. No orders given in my name. No private arrangement with the company. Mr. Finch receives protection, and every tenant keeps possession until the commissioner reviews the accounts. I no longer control the northern properties. Then use what you still control: your voice, your title, and the truth about the authority you knowingly signed. He nodded once. It was not reconciliation. It was a working agreement made under her terms. Eleanor wrapped the seal register in fresh oilcloth. The schoolmaster, Mr. Finch, the widow, Mrs. Wren, and Adrian each signed across the paper, binding so any attempt to open it would break their marks. For the first time, they had evidence connecting the false debts, stolen payments, company leases, and defective seal. The auction bell began ringing in the market square. They carried the ledger outside. A magistrate's carriage blocked the road. Silas stepped down first. Julian followed, immaculate despite the smoke drifting above the village. 4 constables surrounded the schoolhouse. Silas held up the accusation Eleanor had refused to sign at Vale House. A mark now appeared on the signature line, an imitation of her hand, admitting that grief had caused her to steal and alter private documents. Julian addressed the constables. There is the missing Ashcombe register. Take it from her. Adrian moved in front of Eleanor. You will do no such thing. The magistrate produced another paper. I have a sworn declaration stating that Miss Vale removed records without authority and influenced a clerk to support her delusions. Eleanor recognized Adrian's signature at the bottom. It was the statement he had given the royal secretary the previous night to demonstrate that his administration remained stable. The words had been expanded, but the signature was genuine. Once again, his attempt to protect his pride had become a weapon in Julian's hands. The constables seized Mr. Finch and tore the sealed ledger from Eleanor's grasp. Julian examined the unbroken witness signatures around its wrapping. Now he knew exactly how close they had come to proving everything. Release Mr. Finch, Adrian ordered. The magistrate did not move. Your Grace, the clerk has confessed to concealing estate property. I instructed Miss Vale to examine those records. Any clerk who assisted her acted under my authority. Julian unfolded Adrian's earlier declaration. This says otherwise. I signed that statement before I understood what had been concealed. The villagers gathered around the constables. Beyond them, buyers had begun arriving for the auction. Some represented wealthy landowners. Others carried the hard expressions of men paid to purchase property without asking questions. The magistrate pointed toward the market square. These disputes may be presented to the royal commissioner. The auction is legally authorized and will proceed. Not with stolen titles, Eleanor said. Silas smiled. The only stolen document is the one found in your hands. The constables carried the sealed register into the inn, where the magistrate opened it before two witnesses. Eleanor watched from the doorway as he broke the paper, wrapping bearing their signatures. Julian remained beside him throughout the examination. Several minutes later, the magistrate returned holding the narrow book. This is not an Ashcombe seal register. Mr. Finch stared at him. It is. The magistrate opened it. Every page was blank. The leather cover was the same. A streak of flour remained across one corner. Even the oilcloth carried the small tear Eleanor had noticed when Mr. Finch removed it from the sack. Yet the written pages were gone. You changed it, Mr. Finch said. One constable struck him across the mouth. Eleanor rushed forward, but Adrian caught the constable's arm. Touch him again, the Duke said, and you will answer to me. The magistrate's expression hardened. Your influence does not extend to obstructing lawful officers. Julian took the blank book. Miss Vale likely intended to fill this with whatever accusation suited her. Fortunately, she was stopped in time. You saw the written entries, Eleanor told Adrian. I did. So did 5 others. All people under her influence, Silas said. A dismissed clerk, a former servant, an indebted widow, and a village schoolmaster whose property is included in the dispute. The lie was carefully constructed. Every witness had a reason to support Eleanor, while Julian appeared to possess no motive beyond protecting the estate. The auctioneer climbed onto a wooden platform, by authority of the administrator appointed under the hand and seal of His Grace, the Duke of Ashcombe. Stop, Adrian called. The auctioneer lowered his hammer. Adrian stepped onto the platform. Julian's confidence faltered. Consider what you are doing. For once, Adrian said. I am. He looked over the villagers, buyers, constables, and the royal secretary standing near the inn. 3 months ago, Miss Vale brought evidence that the northern property records had been altered. I refused to examine it properly. I publicly called her dishonest because accepting her warning would have required me to admit that my own administration had failed. No one moved. Eleanor had demanded a public correction. She had not expected him to give it while his estate was collapsing around him. Adrian continued. Last night, she placed further evidence before me. I again chose convenience over investigation. Against her explicit warning, I transferred authority to Lord Cresswell. Every seizure ordered under that authority was made possible by my signature. Julian mounted the first step. You are speaking under extraordinary distress. No. I was blind, under extraordinary pride. The royal secretary wrote quickly in his notebook. Adrian's confession would not restore the villages. It would do something his title had always protected him from doing. Place the full weight of his error under his own name. I withdraw every accusation I made against Miss Vale, he said. She acted with greater loyalty toward my tenants than I did. If records were removed under her direction, they were removed with my permission. If a charge of mismanagement must be made, bring it against me. The magistrate's face tightened. He could no longer hold Mr. Finch for assisting an unauthorized examination when the Duke publicly confirmed the authority. He ordered the clerk released. But the royal secretary stepped forward. Your Grace, your admission confirms that you transferred estate authority while aware of unresolved evidence. Until the Crown concludes its investigation, you will surrender the use of the formal Ashcombe seal and withdraw from the County Land Commission. A murmur spread through the buyers. Adrian's position on the commission had been the foundation of his political influence. Losing it would damage his family for years. He gave the secretary his signet without argument. Then he looked at Eleanor, not asking for gratitude, and not offering the sacrifice as payment for forgiveness. She respected that. She did not forgive him. The auctioneer raised his hammer again. The first lot comprises 6 cottages and adjoining fields at Hatherden. Silas handed him a bundle tied with green silk. Eleanor recognized it from the locked cabinet and the departing wagons. The stolen pages of the seal register had not been destroyed. They had been transformed into company leases and placed inside the title packets offered for sale. But without the written register, she could not prove where the paper had come from. The first property sold to a company agent. The second followed. The widow began to weep as her cottage was announced. Eleanor approached the platform. "I give notice that every title offered today is disputed." The auctioneer glanced at the magistrate. "The objection is recorded. The sale will continue." Julian leaned close enough that only Eleanor could hear him. "You have lost your home, your inheritance, your proof, and now his power. Tell me, Miss Vale, what remains of your cleverness when no man with authority believes you?" Eleanor looked at the lease bundle in his hand. Eleanor ran one finger beside the green thread. "These holes were not made for ribbon." Mr. Finch bent closer. "They are binding holes." She tilted the page toward the light. Beneath the company writing, 3 scraped words remained. "Proposal, Miss Eleanor Vale." Adrian's breath caught. "That proposal was entered yesterday," he said. Eleanor looked at the 14-month-old date printed above it. "Then Julian has just sworn to a date this paper cannot possibly have." She could not simply accuse him. She needed him to authenticate the company papers and swear to their age before the hidden proposal entry was revealed. She turned to the auctioneer. "Before you sell the next property, require Lord Cresswell to state when these leases were created." Julian laughed. "Why should I answer you?" "Because no cautious buyer will purchase land from a man afraid to confirm the date on his own documents." Several buyers began murmuring among themselves. Eleanor raised her voice. "Let him swear that these pages belonged to the North Vale Improvement Company before the Duke of Ashcombe ever proposed marriage to me." Julian's smile slowly disappeared. The next lie could not be hidden inside a ledger or blamed on a frightened clerk. Eleanor intended to make him tell it before the entire county. The auctioneer lowered his hammer. "I will not invite argument over every document," he said, "but the dates must be confirmed before further sales proceed." Several buyers voiced their agreement. They had come hoping to purchase valuable land cheaply, not to inherit a fraud investigation involving the Crown. Julian climbed onto the platform with the lease bundle beneath his arm. "These agreements were prepared 14 months ago," he announced. "The North Vale Improvement Company began acquiring distressed properties long before Miss Vale developed her obsession with my family." "And the paper?" Eleanor asked. "Purchased for the company at that time. It was never part of an Ashcombe account book. Never. No writing has been removed or replaced. None." Eleanor looked toward the magistrate. "Please record his answers." Silas pushed through the crowd. "This is outrageous. She is not conducting a court." The Royal Commissioner's secretary closed his notebook. "No, but statements made to interfere with a Crown investigation may still carry consequences. I will record them." Julian's expression remained composed. "Record whatever you please." Eleanor asked the auctioneer to place the title packets on a clean table where everyone could see them. The schoolmaster and the widow stood on either side, ensuring that no page could be removed or exchanged. Only then did she approach. "Lord Cresswell says these leases were prepared 14 months ago, yet the properties listed here did not appear delinquent until 9 months ago. A company may plan future acquisitions. Before the owners owed anything, responsible investors anticipate opportunity. And did your responsible investors also anticipate which tenant payments would later disappear from the Ashcombe books?" A restless murmur passed through the crowd. Julian turned toward the buyers. Miss Vale found minor clerical errors and built a conspiracy around them. She then persuaded a frightened clerk to steal estate records. Mr. Finch stepped forward. "I was ordered to destroy the register. You were dismissed for dishonesty. After I refused to alter another rent entry." Julian raised his voice. "This man's mother benefited from Miss Vale's money. The widow beside her recovered a cottage through Miss Vale's interference. Her former housekeeper stole Vale family papers. Every witness has been purchased, protected, or manipulated." Julian pointed toward the widow. "Did Miss Vale save your cottage?" "Yes." "Did she promise money to Mr. Finch's family?" "She protected them," Mr. Finch said. Julian smiled at the buyers. Protection is a generous word for purchasing witnesses. Eleanor stepped between him and the crowd. I helped people before I knew whether they could help me. That is the difference between protection and payment. Julian pointed at her. She came to Ashcombe, determined to force herself into a ducal marriage. When His Grace hesitated, she created a crisis in which he would believe he needed her. The accusation struck the crowd exactly as he intended. A woman seeking marriage could be called ambitious. A woman understanding contracts could be called manipulative. Combine the two, and every act of competence became evidence against her. Adrian moved toward the platform. Eleanor stopped him with one glance. This was her accusation to answer. I did not ask the Duke to propose, she said. I refused to accept him. She turned to the auctioneer. His original proposal is still sealed. Ask His Grace to produce it. Adrian reached inside his coat and removed the document she had left beside his wine. I took it from the dining table after Miss Vale departed, he said. It has remained in my possession since. The unbroken red wax carried the flawed hawk and its crescent-shaped fracture. Eleanor placed it beside the company leases. The same matrix sealed both. Julian shrugged. They are Ashcombe transactions. That proves nothing. No, it proves the formal estate seal was used. You told us the company leases were prepared 14 months ago. When was my proposal prepared? Yesterday morning. By whom? At His Grace's direction. That was not my question. Julian hesitated. Adrian answered for him. My cousin drafted and sealed it. Eleanor looked at the buyers. Lord Cresswell therefore had the defective matrix in his possession yesterday, shortly before he transferred these villages to his company. My company, Julian repeated. You have not proved I own a single share. Then perhaps you will identify its owners. The investors are confidential. Silas tried to draw him away from the table. You need not continue indulging her. Eleanor lifted the grain counterfoil. This payment was intended for Hatherden's mill. The recipient's name was removed, but the remaining letters are S and V. There must be dozens of names with those initials, Silas said. Only one received 3 payments, matching the amounts falsely entered against Ashcombe's northern loan. You cannot prove I received anything. Mrs. Wren opened the rescued portfolio. Mr. Vale kept household payment lists, she said. I copied the amounts into the domestic book before his lordship ordered it burned. She produced a small notebook from her pocket. It contained the dates on which large drafts arrived at Vale House. Each matched a missing Ashcombe payment. Silas stared at her. You stole that. I wrote it. The commissioner's secretary took both records for comparison. Eleanor returned to the lease packets. The money travelled from Ashcombe to Silas Vale. The properties travelled from both families into the North Vale Improvement Company. Lord Cresswell controlled the accounts, the official seal, and the company documents connecting them. Julian's restraint cracked. You have offered receipts, household gossip, and a few grains of coloured sand. None proves when these leases were written. You are correct. His confidence returned too quickly. Eleanor picked up the first sheet. That proof is inside the paper itself. The green silk passed through pairs of holes running down the inner edges. Eleanor untied the bundles and arranged 6 pages across the table. The shallow tiers formed matching patterns. A curve missing from one page fitted the fibres protruding from the next. A higher notch joined another pair. In their original order, the company leases formed one continuous gathering, removed from a bound volume. These were not purchased as loose sheets, Eleanor said. They were cut from a ledger, an old blank ledger, Julian replied. That was common practice. Then why scrape the pages? I see no scraping. Eleanor tilted one sheet toward the sunlight. The surface beneath the company lease was thinner and rougher than the untouched margins. Tiny paper fibres had been lifted by a blade. She placed the schoolmaster's reading glass above it. Faint depressions crossed the page beneath the newer writing. Julian stepped forward. Those marks could be anything. Eleanor covered the page with a clean sheet and rubbed the side of a charcoal stick lightly across it. The sunken lines remained pale, while the surrounding surface darkened. Letters slowly emerged. Use of formal seal marriage proposal for Miss Eleanor Vale. The crowd fell silent. The entry concerned a proposal drafted yesterday, yet it lay beneath a company lease Julian had sworn was 14 months old. Silas reached across the table. Mr. Finch caught his arm before he could tear the paper. The magistrate ordered both men back. Julian's face had lost all colour, but he recovered quickly. She placed those impressions there. The document has been in her hands. No, the auctioneer said. Everyone turned toward him. These packets were delivered sealed at sunrise. Lord Cresswell opened them himself on this platform. Miss Vale did not touch the pages until after he swore to their age. The trap had closed around his own testimony. Still, Eleanor had one more question. She pointed to a faint line beneath her name. The entry continues. It identifies the person who collected the formal seal after my proposal was prepared. Julian looked toward the road, as though calculating whether he could reach a horse before the constables stopped him. Eleanor rubbed charcoal across the final indentation. A title began to appear beneath the black dust. The royal secretary leaned closer to read it. The charcoal revealed 2 words. Lord Cresswell. Julian turned toward the nearest horse. The constables blocked his path. This proves only that I collected the seal, he said. I was responsible for estate documents. It proves you removed this page from the register after sealing my proposal yesterday, Eleanor replied. You scraped away the entry, wrote an older date above it, and placed the page inside a lease you swore had existed for 14 months. Silas backed away from the platform. The royal commissioner's carriage entered the square before he reached the inn. The commissioner stepped down and received his secretary's notebook. After reading Julian's recorded statements, he ordered the auction suspended and every title packet placed under Crown custody. The blank register is also evidence, Eleanor said. It was exchanged after being taken into the inn. The magistrate stiffened. Are you accusing my officers? I am observing that 6 witnesses saw written entries before you received it. The commissioner ordered the inn doors closed. A search of the magistrate's document case uncovered a second ledger wrapped in oilcloth. Its written pages remained intact, and the missing section matched the torn edges of the company leases. Mr. Finch identified it as the register he had hidden inside the estate coal cupboard. The baker and the widow confirmed the flour stain and tear in its original wrapping. The blank volume had been prepared in advance. One constable admitted that Julian had instructed him to make the exchange, while the magistrate distracted the witnesses. In return, the constable's brother had been promised one of the seized farms. The magistrate tried to deny knowing of the substitution, but the key to his document case was found in Julian's pocket. The commissioner turned to Eleanor. Explain the entire transaction. She placed her father's surviving accounts beside the Ashcombe register. My father served as trustee, while the northern boundary dispute remained unresolved. During that work, he learned that a canal was being considered along the River Hather. The route was confidential, but these measurements show the land required for its construction. Her brass ruler traced the narrow path from her 3 farms through every Ashcombe property offered at auction. Mr. Vale refused to help anyone acquire the route secretly. After his death, Silas Vale forged an authorization, transferring my trust income to himself. Lord Cresswell then redirected Ashcombe rent and grain payments to Vale House. Mrs. Wren's household notebook confirmed when the drafts arrived. Tenant payments were moved to vacant properties, Eleanor continued. The occupied cottages were declared delinquent and transferred to the North Vale Improvement Company. Blue sand from Lord Cresswell's desk was used on the altered receipts. Pages removed from the Ashcombe seal register became company leases. The defective estate matrix made those leases appear official. And the company's owners? The commissioner asked. Eleanor looked at Julian. He refused to identify them because the payment trail leads to him and Silas Vale. The commissioner opened the original register. Attached to its rear cover was the expense authorization for the silver sand shaker. Julian had charged it directly to a company account bearing his private correspondence address. Silas's incoming drafts matched the other half of the company's investment ledger. Together, the 2 men had intended to acquire the entire canal route before Parliament announced it. Once the project became public, they could demand an extraordinary price from the Crown or control every commercial vessel passing through Ashcombe land. Eleanor had been the only person capable of connecting her father's survey, the altered trust, and the estate accounts. That was why Silas destroyed her reputation and cast her out. Julian had encouraged Adrian to dismiss her publicly because the Duke's contempt made every later warning easier to discredit. Once Adrian signed away control, Julian gained the authority required to seize the final properties before the royal inquiry. The commissioner faced Adrian. Did Miss Vale warn you against granting that authority? She did. Did you examine her evidence? No. Were you prevented from doing so? Adrian looked at Julian. Then, at the villagers whose homes had nearly been sold. No, I chose not to. He did not blame deception, pressure, or incomplete information. I believed obedience was more reliable than intelligence. I protected my pride and placed my people under the authority of the man stealing from them. Julian finally lost his composure. You would sacrifice your own blood for a woman who has refused you. Adrian's answer came without hesitation. No, I'm telling the truth, because she should never have needed to marry me before I was willing to speak it. The commissioner ordered Julian, Silas, the magistrate, and the bribed constable detained pending charges of conspiracy, forgery, theft, obstruction of a crown inquiry, and attempted fraudulent conveyance. The auction was declared invalid. Every tenant retained possession of his home, while the genuine accounts were restored. The North Vale Improvement Company's property was frozen, and its remaining funds were placed under Crown supervision to compensate the families whose rents had been stolen. Silas's forged transfer of Eleanor's trust could not survive the original accounts and impossible signature date. Her 3 farms, unpaid income, and personal papers were returned to an independent trust beyond the control of Vale House or any future husband. Julian lost his estate authority, his political appointments, and his position in the ducal succession arrangements over private Ashcombe property. The criminal court would decide the length of his imprisonment. Adrian's consequence was different. He retained his title, but the Crown permanently removed him from the County Land Commission. He surrendered control of the northern accounts to an independent board that included elected tenant representatives. He sold his London townhouse to repay every duplicated rent and rebuild Hatherden's storehouse without using estate debt. Then he published a correction in every newspaper that had repeated his accusation against Eleanor. It did not call her confused, emotional, or unexpectedly intelligent. It called her truthful. 8 months later, Eleanor stood on the steps of her restored home, while workmen carried her father's books inside. The same volumes had been thrown into the rain when Silas banished her. Now they filled a library belonging solely to her. From the eastern farms, Eleanor established an independent records office that examined leases and rent accounts for families unable to challenge powerful landowners alone. Mr. Finch became its chief clerk. Mrs. Wren appointed herself guardian of both the household keys and Eleanor's working hours. A carriage stopped beyond the gate. Adrian stepped down without servants, legal documents, or a marriage proposal. He carried the final box recovered from Vale House. Eleanor met him at the door. I believe these belong to you, he said. Inside were her father's letters and the original deed creating her trust. She examined every page before closing the box. They do. Adrian did not attempt to cross the threshold. I once offered you my name because I needed your intelligence, he said. Then I punished you each time that intelligence challenged me. I am sorry not because I lost authority, and not because you refused me. I am sorry because you told the truth, and I knowingly made truth more costly for you than silence. It was the apology he had once been too proud to give. Eleanor accepted it. She did not accept his hand. What happens now? He asked. You return to Ashcombe and continue becoming the man who made that apology. And if I wish to see you again, you may write. A faint, uncertain smile touched his face. May I hope for an answer? You may earn one. Adrian bowed and turned toward his carriage. Eleanor looked at the restored books passing through her doorway. Once, men had cast them into the rain because knowledge made her inconvenient. Now that knowledge protected an entire valley. She opened the recovered box and found a blank sheet among her father's letters. After a moment, she carried it into the library. She would answer Adrian when she chose, and only in words entirely her own.